An entire generation of men is quietly walking away from love, not out of weakness, not out of bitterness, but because of something much colder and far more terrifying: clarity. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once warned that the greatest danger in life is to lose yourself. What he couldn't have imagined is a world where men would willingly surrender love itself just to hold on to what little of themselves still remains. Picture this: John, a 28-year-old lawyer, handsome, successful, and by society's standards, a catch. Yet every night John comes home to an empty apartment, not because he's lonely, not because he's unwanted, but by choice. He belongs to a silent movement, men who have looked into the abyss of modern romance and said, "No more." This isn't rage. It's not even heartbreak. It's something quieter, sharper, and permanent: a refusal. So how did we get here? Kierkegaard argued that despair is the sickness unto death, not the kind of sickness that kills the body, but the kind that makes life itself feel like a slow decay. And modern love, with all its illusions and expectations, has become the perfect incubator for that despair. Let's look at the numbers. Studies from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships reveal that men today are 50% less likely to seek romantic relationships compared to their father's generation. The American Sociological Review found that 1 in 3 men under 30 reported zero sexual activity in the past year, a historic high. But this isn't just about sex. It's about something deeper: the death of meaning. In the 19th century, Kierkegaard wrote about a man who fell in love but realized that marriage would kill the very passion that gave the love life in the first place. He called this the aesthetic paradox, the idea that once love is institutionalized, it becomes its own gravedigger. Fast forward to today, and men are living this paradox at scale. A major psychological science study tracked 11,000 couples and found that men's marital happiness plummets dramatically after the first year, while women's happiness remains stable. Why? Because modern love often demands that men amputate parts of their soul to fit into roles they never signed up for. And it gets darker. In 2018, researchers at the University of Chicago discovered that single, childless men are statistically happier than their married peers. Let that sink in. The very things men are told to chase, love, family, commitment, are the same things most likely to erode their joy. Kierkegaard predicted this tension when he wrote, "Marry and you will regret it. Do not marry and you will also regret it." The modern man isn't giving up on love because he's broken. He's giving up because he's done the math. Then there's the betrayal. Imagine working 80-hour weeks to build a life only to have it dismantled in divorce court because she wasn't happy, or spending years as an emotional caretaker only to be discarded when someone taller, richer, or more exciting shows up. A Cornell University study found that nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by women, not because of abuse, not because of infidelity, but most often because of a vague sense of unhappiness. Kierkegaard called this the despair of possibility, the agony of knowing that no matter how hard you try, it will never be enough. But this story isn't just about despair. It's also about liberation. Men who walk away from love aren't losers. They're pioneers. They're the ones who've stared into the void and realized the only way to win is not to play. And that's where the real journey begins. Let's talk about hidden power. There's an old story from ancient Sparta. When a boy came of age, he was taken into the wilderness, stripped of his possessions, and left to survive alone. The ritual was called the proving. Its purpose? To teach one brutal lesson. You are enough, even when you have nothing. Kierkegaard knew this truth.
He wrote, "The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but if one will, are to be lived." And yet, modern men have been conditioned to believe the opposite, that their worth is tied to being chosen, to being loved, to being validated by someone else. But what happens when a man stops chasing approval and turns inward?
Take James, a 32-year-old architect. 2 years ago, he found himself kneeling on the floor of his empty apartment, holding the engagement ring his fiancée had just returned. Her parting words, "I just don't feel the spark anymore." James did what men are expected to do in pain. He drank. He distracted himself. He pretended he was fine. But then something unexpected happened. He stumbled across Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling. A single passage gutted him. The knight of faith is obliged to rely upon himself alone, to feel himself shut up within himself. That's when James made a choice that changed his life. He stopped chasing love. He stopped trying to fill the void with relationships, and instead, he embraced the silence. Within a year, James had traveled to 14 countries, built a consulting business that tripled his income, and, more importantly, discovered a truth most men never learn. Loneliness is not the absence of others, it's the absence of yourself.
Loneliness is not the absence of others, it's the absence of yourself. This is what men like James are beginning to understand, and it's a revelation Kierkegaard would have recognized instantly. He believed that despair wasn't something to be avoided, but something to be faced head-on. Why? Because despair is the doorway to authenticity. And that's exactly what modern men are discovering when they turn away from love as it's been sold to them. They're not running from intimacy, they're rejecting a system that asks them to trade their soul for companionship. Here's the paradox: when a man chooses solitude, he doesn't become weaker, he becomes terrifyingly strong. Let's take another story. Mark, a 40-year-old corporate executive, had the picture-perfect life: suburban home, wife, 2 kids, a golden retriever. But behind the photos on social media was a man crushed under silent despair. His marriage had become a business arrangement. Intimacy was gone. Respect was gone. Love had decayed into logistics, bills, carpools, grocery lists. Then came the breaking point. After years of compromise, his wife filed for divorce. Half his assets disappeared overnight. He lost custody of his children 3 days a week. For most men, this is the end of the story, but for Mark, it was the beginning. He sold the house, bought a cabin in the mountains, and walked away from the corporate grind. Friends thought he'd lost everything, but Mark insists it was the first time he'd ever been free. Today, he runs a coaching business for men in their 30s and 40s who are trying to rebuild after divorce. His YouTube channel has nearly 200,000 subscribers. Here's the irony. By losing the love he thought defined him, Mark found the life he was meant to live. Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have." And that's what traps so many men, the imagined future, the wife, the house, the kids, the dream of happily ever after. It's a fantasy rooted not in truth, but in cultural programming. But when men let go of that dream, when they burn the script society handed them, something extraordinary happens. They begin to author their own lives. Let's go deeper. The University of Michigan ran a longitudinal study that followed men for over 2 decades. The results? Men who never married, never had children, and invested instead in their careers, communities, or personal growth reported life satisfaction levels equal to or higher than their married peers. This doesn't mean love is meaningless, it means love, as it's currently structured, is failing men.
Think about it. For centuries, love was about survival. Families needed alliances. Men and women needed each other to survive harsh conditions, raise children, and pass on their lineage. But in today's world, That survival contract has expired. Women no longer need men for protection or provision, and men no longer need women to validate their existence. So what's left? For many men, the answer is nothing but illusion. This is why Kierkegaard's philosophy hits so hard in our time. He believed that true faith and true love are absurd. They require a leap into the unknown, without guarantees, without security. But modern relationships promise security, predictability, and endless compromise. The absurd leap has been replaced with a contractual safety net, and in the process, the very fire of love has been extinguished. Here's the real tragedy. When men walk away from love, society doesn't just lose husbands or fathers. It loses creators, builders, visionaries. Why? Because the energy men once poured into chasing approval, proving themselves worthy, and holding broken systems together is now being redirected. And that redirection is dangerous, for better or worse. Some men channel it into self-destruction, addictions, anger, resentment. But others, like James and Mark, channel it into creation. They build businesses, movements, and legacies. They carve out a life that's entirely their own.
Kierkegaard described this as the transformation from the aesthetic life to the ethical life. The aesthetic life is lived for appearances, for pleasure, for validation. The ethical life is lived in truth, in confrontation with reality, no matter how painful. And this is where many men find themselves today, standing at the threshold, deciding whether to keep chasing a dying illusion or to embrace the terrifying freedom of truth. But let's not romanticize this. Walking away from love isn't glamorous. It's brutal. It means facing nights of silence that stretch like an ocean. It means scrolling through old messages and feeling the sting of loss. It means watching friends pair off while you sit alone at the table for one. And yet, in that solitude, something sacred emerges. A man learns to enjoy his own company. He discovers the power of saying no without apology. He starts to build not for approval, but for purpose. And slowly, he realizes the truth Kierkegaard whispered across the centuries. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Modern men are daring. By refusing to lose themselves in the machinery of love, they are daring to step into the unknown, alone but unbroken.
Modern men are daring. By stepping away from the illusions of love, they are risking loneliness, but they are reclaiming themselves. And in doing so, they may be discovering something far greater than what they've lost. Because here's the paradox. The moment a man no longer needs love, he becomes capable of experiencing love in its purest form. Think of Daniel, a 35-year-old musician. After a decade of failed relationships, betrayals, and heartbreak, he made a vow: no more chasing, no more bending, no more bargaining his identity for affection. For years, he poured himself into his craft, writing music that captured the raw ache of solitude and the strange beauty of self-discovery. Then something unexpected happened. Love found him, but this time, it wasn't the desperate, grasping kind. It wasn't built on need or dependency. It was two whole people standing side by side, not two broken halves trying to complete each other. This is the irony Kierkegaard understood so well. Only when you give up the dream of completion can you encounter another human being as they truly are. Only when you no longer need them can you genuinely love them. But most men never make it this far. The majority remain trapped, either endlessly chasing relationships that hollow them out or numbing themselves with distractions. They fear the silence, so they never hear the voice inside that could guide them to something greater. That's why the men who walk away are so important. They're not just rejecting romance, they're pointing toward a different path, a path that refuses to sacrifice truth for comfort. And this path has consequences, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Because what happens when millions of men decide that love, marriage, and family are no longer worth the cost? We're already beginning to see the answer. Birth rates are plummeting in nearly every developed country. Marriage is becoming a niche institution reserved for the few who still believe in it. Entire economies are trembling under the weight of a generation that no longer wants to play by the old rules. Some call this a crisis, but perhaps it's something else. Perhaps it's an awakening. Kierkegaard wrote that truth is always paradoxical. To cling to illusions is to feel safe but live a lie. To confront reality is to feel lost, but to finally live. And that's what these men are doing. By giving up on love, they are confronting reality. The reality that the old model no longer works, that the promises of happily ever after are broken, that the cost of fitting in is often the slow death of the soul. But in this confrontation lies rebirth. When a man stops asking, "How do I find love?" and starts asking, "How do I find myself?" everything changes. His career shifts from obligation to expression. His body becomes not just a vessel, but a temple. His friendships deepen because they are no longer filtered through the need to impress or perform. And slowly, he realizes that the greatest love affair of his life was never meant to be with another person. It was meant to be with the man he could become. This doesn't mean he'll be alone forever. Some will remain solitary, and they'll be fine. Others, like Daniel, will find love again, but not the kind that chains, the kind that liberates, the kind Kierkegaard hinted at when he spoke of faith as a passionate inwardness.
So what does this mean for you, watching right now? It means if you feel the despair Kierkegaard described, if you've tasted the emptiness of love that costs more than it gives, you are not broken. You are not a failure. You may be standing on the edge of the same revelation that has transformed countless men before you. You do not need love to be whole. You do not need someone else to save you. You are enough. And in that realization, you step into a kind of power that no relationship can give you, and no heartbreak can take away. So maybe Kierkegaard was right. Truth is a trap. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. But perhaps it's the kind of trap worth falling into. Because the truth is this: the greatest love story of your life is not waiting for you in someone else's eyes. It's waiting in the mirror, in the man you could become, if you refuse to compromise. And if you dare to walk away, not from love itself, but from the illusion of it, you may just discover what real freedom feels like.